It's February 2026 and I've headed for modern-day Catalan city of Tarragona, built on the site of Tàrraco, the first Roman settlement on the Iberian Peninsula. Located on the Costa Daurada, less than 100 kilometres southwest to the Catalan capital of Barcelona, the city of Tarragona, today the 7th largest city in Catalonia and 21st largest in Spain, occupies an enviable position on a sweeping sandy bay of the Mediterranean. Founded in the 3rd century BCE as Tarraco, at the point where the Roman Empire first set foot on the Iberian Peninsula, it went on to be the capital of the Tarragonense province that covers most of the north, centre and east of what is today modern-day Spain. Its wide collection of archaeological remains from an amphitheatre and Roman circus, through theatres, baths, forums and walls, some of which were still in use well into the 19th century, have earned it a well-deserved spot on the UNESCO list of World Heritage. Originally established as a small military base by military leaders and brothers Gnaeus and Publius Cornelius Scipio in 218 BC during the Second Punic War, it soon grew into the city of Tarraco around the fortifiable lands on the top of the hill overlooking the surrounding flat plains and the coast. The city became the main wintering base for the Roman armies in Hispania as they undertook the drawn-out process of conquering the peninsula. With a strong military presence to protect them, the new city soon attracted merchants and traders, with the port rapidly becoming an important trading post as Roman citizens saw Hispania as a land of new opportunities. Almost as soon as the Romans arrived, they'd begun to build defences, wary that the defeated Carthaginians could always come back. A full encirclement of the city was completed sometime around 125 BCE. The city continued to flourish throughout the Roman period as the most important city on the peninsula and one of the most important cities of the empire. In 122, Emperor Hadrian, of wall fame, stated Tarraco civitas ubi ver aeternum est, or Tarragona, the city where spring is eternal. Devastated by Vandals in 260, it took some time before the city recovered, with its rebuilding only starting in 285 under Diocletian at the start of what's now referred to as the late Roman Empire. In 476, the last Western Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus, was dethroned, and around the same time the whole of the Tarraconese was conquered by Uric, king of the Visigoths. Tarragona continued to be an important metropolis, but political power shifted within the Visigoth domains, first to Toulouse, then Barcino, modern-day Barcelona, before settling in Toletum, today Toledo. In the early 8th century, the city fell under the control of the Caliphate of Cordoba, where it stayed until 1013 and the demise of the Caliphate, at which point it became part of the Taifa of Zaragoza for nearly a century, before coming under control of the Almoravid dynasty in 1110, though their control was soon lost as the reconquest of Spain saw the Counts of Barcelona taking charge just 7 years later. From 1129 to 1173, the city was once again a capital, this time of a short-lived Norman-controlled Principality of Tarragona. Control of the city passed through various crowns as the kingdoms of Iberia slowly coalesced into the Spanish Empire. The city was captured by Catalan insurgents with the backing of France in 1641 during the Reapers' War, but was retaken by Spanish troops 3 years later. In 1705, during the War of Spanish Succession, it was once again captured, this time by combined forces of the Portuguese, Dutch and British, who held on to the city until the Treaty of Utrecht in 1713, the same treaty that saw Spain cede Gibraltar to the British. The city was besieged twice during the 1808 to 1814 Peninsular War, first from May the 5th to June the 29th, 1811, the result of which was the city eventually falling to the troops of Napoleon. The second siege, from the 3rd to the 11th of June 1813, saw a combined Franco-Italian garrison hold off an overwhelming Anglo-Spanish force under the control of British Lieutenant General John Murray. Murray was subsequently removed from command, and the city was recaptured by the Anglo-Spanish forces on the 19th of August, albeit with significant damage to the historic buildings of the city, with many monumental buildings being blown up during the capture. Recovery was rapid, in part from the city being exempt from taxes up until 1826, with the construction of a modern port being a vital part of the works around this time. In 1854, construction work began on the Rambla Nova, a 45-metre wide avenue that crosses the modern city from the northwest to the southeast, stretching from the Platja de Lmircale Tarraco to the Balcón del Mediterráneo, a viewpoint, the highest point of a promenade some 42 metres above sea level, where Tarragona residents and tourists go to touch iron. During the Spanish Civil War, the city was bombed by nationalist aviation on the 5th of November 1938. Following the war, the city welcomed large numbers of emigrants from other Spanish regions, particularly Aragon and Andalusia. The city became heavily industrialised during the mid and latter part of the 20th century, with the petroleum industry becoming a major employer in the city. Today, tourism plays an increasing role in the city's economy, though much like larger neighbour Barcelona, an increasing movement against particularly cruise ship tourism is building. At the highest point of the Old Town, on a site once occupied by a Roman temple, a Visigothic cathedral and a Moorish mosque, sits the Cathedral Basilica Metropolitana y Primada de Tarragona, or more simply, the Cathedral of St. Thecla. Sometime around 19 AD, a temple had been built by the Romans dedicated to Emperor Augustus, but just 240 years later, the city had been heavily converted to Christianity. Though that didn't stop Bishop Fructuosus and his deacons, Augerio and Iologus, being martyred in the amphitheatre in 259. With the Visigoth occupation of the city from the late 5th century, works began on a new cathedral on the site of a former Roman temple, and this survived for nearly 250 years until the arrival of the Moors and the imposition of Islam on the city, at which point it's likely the cathedral would have been converted to a mosque. The reconquest of Catalonia allowed the rebuilding of the city, and the bishop moved back to sit permanently in Tarragona from 1154 onwards, at which point works were started on a new cathedral on this important site. Originally begun in Romanesque style in the latter part of the 12th century, it wasn't completed until the 14th century, by which time architectural styles had moved on to the Gothic, so there are elements from both styles across the building. The cathedral was consecrated in June 1331, but as with most cathedrals across medieval Europe, that didn't stop ambitious bishops continuing to tinker with their cathedrals, and Tarragona was no different, with various building works carrying on from the 14th to the 18th century, with a hodgepodge of Gothic, Renaissance and Baroque styles on show across both the interior and exterior of the building. On September the 19th, 1894, the cathedral was upgraded to a minor basilica. Restoration and conservation works were undertaken on the cathedral between 1999 and 2001, which were then followed by archaeological excavations and restorations for chapels. In 2007, geophysical surveys of the cathedral's subsoil proved the presence of the Roman Temple of Augustus below the central nave. A further round of restoration work started in 2010 that focused on cleaning and consolidating the vault and wall facings, including the recovery of mural paintings. 2012 saw a final round, for now, of works focused on replacing electrical, fire and humidity control surfaces, as well as repairs to the floor. The self-guided tour takes you around the main floor of the cathedral before taking you past the Chapel of St Mary, also known as the Tailor's Chapel, and through a side door that brings you out in the chancel by the high altar. You are then routed past the main altarpiece into the apse and sacrarium at the very rear of the chancel. Before being directed through the sacristy and into the small cathedral treasury, where there's an exhibition of some of the cathedral's gold and silverware. Back into the main nave of the church and under the octagonal dome, you get a good idea of the size of the cathedral, with the central nave being 16.5 metres wide and 26 metres high, with an additional 12 metres on top with the dome. The largest of the chapels off of the main cathedral is the Chapel of the Blessed Sacrament, which was redesigned between 1582 and 1592 in classicist style, at which point the original Romanesque vaulting was pierced and a drum dome was added, which brings light flooding into the chapel. Located within the site of a former canon's refectory is the Diocesan Museum, which houses a small collection of artefacts relating to the cathedral. Beyond the museum, you can explore some of the archaeology of the building by walking along a passageway that sits behind the rear walls of the chapels of the cathedral and the outer walls and buildings of the complex. Sitting off of the cloister is the Chapel of Corpus Christi, which forms the second part of the Diocesan Museum, which mostly focuses on the artwork that the cathedral owns. And from here it's a walk through a side room to reach the chapter house of the cathedral. Exiting the Corpus Christi Chapel, you enter the cloister, which likely predates the construction of the rest of the cathedral itself, being built to link together some existing buildings for the bishop on his return to Tarragona in preparation for works to commence on the main cathedral building. From the fountain in the centre of the cloister is one of the best views of the cathedral complex. Located close to the cathedral is the Casa Canals, the home of the Canals family, a lower nobility family related, as they always are, to the other wealthy and noble families of the region. The Canals originally came from the nearby town of Reus and settled in Tarragona at the end of the 17th century, though the first link between the family and the building, now called Casa Canals, wasn't until 1802, when King Charles IV stayed in the city for the inauguration of the new harbour. The family continued to live in the house up until the latter part of the 20th century, at which point it was passed over to the local council as a cultural asset of local interest. The building sits on the Carrera de Engranada, though the rear elevation is built into the original Roman walls of the city. On the first floor of the building are the main rooms of the house, focused around the grand ballroom, decorated in a neoclassical style. The rest of the rooms of the house are located on wings either side of the ballroom, with the blue room and the bedroom known as the Charles IV chamber located to the right. And on the left wing are the music lounge, and at the very end of the corridor the dining room, complete with the original dining set of the family. In the ballroom are the portraits of the owners. You can take a walk through the first floor rooftop garden before ascending onto the terrace on the upper floors of the house, from where there are views over the building, the surrounding neighbourhood, and out across this part of the city and the Mediterranean Sea. Including down to the Platja de Lmircale at the end of the city's beach and its two forts. The two forts sit at the northern end of the city's Playa El Miracle, or Miracle Beach, the Fortí di San Jordi, Fort of St George, and the Fortí de la Reina, or Queen's Fort. The higher up of the two is St George Fort, which was built by the British during the War of Spanish Succession that saw conflict involving almost all of Europe between 1700 and 1714. The Kingdom of France, Modena, Savoy, Cologne, Bavaria, Hungary, Milan, Sardinia, Naples, Sicily and Castile squared off against Great Britain, the Netherlands, the German Empire, Prussia, Hanover, Saxony, Baden, Austria, Portugal, Papal States, Catalonia, Valencia, Aragon and Mallorca. The fortification, built out of stone and mortar with very thick walls, has a trapezoidal plan. The fort was built as part of a remodelling of a general system of forts that protected Tarragona, helping to create a continuous outer circuit of fortifications that would protect the entire northeastern arc of the city. The fort underwent major renovation and restoration in the early 2020s, but has not been reopened to the public, mostly due to the limited ability to evacuate the space should it become necessary, with just a single entrance limiting capacity inside the fort to less than 30 people. 200 metres to the south of and 40 metres below Fortí di Sant Jordi, and looking considerably older despite being built later, is the Fortí de Reina, located right on the end of the Miracle Point. Built in a similar style to St George's Fort, construction on Queen's Fort was completed in 1745. The fort saw most action during the first siege and defence of Tarragona during the Peninsular War in 1811. The fort was also in use throughout the 19th century in various internal conflicts. Many proposals for how to use the fort have been put forward throughout the 20th century, including different proposals for hotels, restaurants, spas, housing and even a casino. The City Council granted permits to build a restaurant in 1989, but complaints and legal proceedings saw the restaurant being demolished in 2007, with today the site locked up and slowly deteriorating, not helped by the Mediterranean giving the rear of the fort and the rock it sits upon a constant pounding. Running south from the forts on the Punta del Miracle to the walls of the city's harbour is the city's beach, the Playa El Miracle. Oriented south-southeast, the beach has a length of 1,129 metres and an average width of 33. It has fine golden sands and a gentle slope into the water, though in early February, just days after a series of storms had slammed into the Iberian Peninsula, the waters were looking anything but gentle. Heading back into the centre of town and located less than half a mile from the beach is one of the city's more important modern buildings, the Central Market, or Mercat de Tarragona. Built between 1911 and 1915, the market is designed with 3 aisles crossed by a central aisle at the middle, making the building symmetrical through the centre point. Over 10 years, from 2007 to 2017, the building was completely renovated, being gutted back to the external walls and with a modern supermarket dug out beneath the market hall. Whilst inside the buildings have been completely modernised, externally it looks exactly as it would have done on the 19th of December 1915, when the building was first inaugurated. A short distance from the market in the centre of the Rambla Nova is a monument for Castellers, an 11-metre-high bronze sculpture celebrating the tradition of building human towers that originated in Tarragona in the 18th century and has since spread through Catalonia and the Balearic Islands as a symbol of Catalan identity and culture. The whole scene is made up of 222 people and captures the moment the enxaneta, the Casteller who crowns the tower, extends their hand to make the aleta, the hand gesture to show the tower has been completed. 219 figures make up the castle, and amongst the faces have been sculpted into this group are artists Pablo Picasso and Juan Miró, Sagrada Familia architect Antoni Gaudí, musician Pau Casals, and former president of the International Olympic Committee Juan Antoni Samaranch. On one side of the tower are 3 musicians, 2 playing the gralla, a short woodwind instrument, and 1 playing the timbal, a type of drum from the Catalan region. On the opposite side is a cap de colla, or gang leader, who directs the building of the castle. Next time, I discover Tarraco, the city that the Romans founded, as I explore the amphitheatre, walk in the passageways underneath the circus, and look down on the ruins of a once great theatre.